Welcome back to Women Writers in Chinese History. In this video, we'll learn about Shangguan Wan'er, an accomplished poet and the secretary and confidant of the legendary Empress Wu Zetian, China's only emperor. Shangguan Wan'er lived during the early Tang Dynasty from 664 to 710. She served Wu Zetian as an inner palace secretary for nearly 30 years, from 677 to 705, and was closely involved in the rise and fall of Wu Zetian's power. Other than having an eventful career at the palace, Shangguan Wan'er was an innovative poet whose writing prefigured the rise of the most prized literary form in Chinese history, that is Tang poetry. In the following lecture, we'll review both Shangguan Wan'er's political career and her literary talent as a poet. Now, let's look at Shangguan Wan'er's life. Her grandfather, Shangguan Yi, was an eminent official and poet. However, he drafted an edict on behalf of the Emperor Gaozong to deprive Wu Zetian of the title of the Empress, since she had become too powerful. We have mentioned this event in the earlier lecture. Empress Wu soon derailed the plot and charged the involved officials, such as Shangguan Yi, with treason. Both Shangguan Yi and his son Shangguan Tingzhi, Shangguan Wan'er's father, were executed in 664. Shangguan Wan'er was just born that year. Still a newborn baby, Shangguan Wan'er entered the imperial palace with her mother, who was sentenced to serve as a palace slave. Shangguan Wan'er's mother was highly literate and taught her daughter how to read and write in the palace. By the age of 13, Shangguan Wan'er was known around the inner palace for her extraordinary literary gifts. Having heard of her reputation, Wu Zetian, then the empress, tested her and was very impressed by her talent. She then lifted her from slave status and employed her as a secretary to draft official edicts. Thus, by an interesting twist of fate, Shangguan Wan'er found an opportunity to let her talents shine, owing to the appreciation of the very woman who had destroyed her whole family. It seemed that Shangguan Wan'er was not the first nor the last female secretary Empress Wu had employed, but she was likely the most capable and was certainly the most famous. She composed many of the empress's edicts during her reign, both when she was the empress and after she became the emperor. However, one story about her indicates the rather perilous situation she was in when serving the powerful woman emperor. Supposedly, her face was either stabbed or scarred by Wu Zetian's order because she once offended her. According to some accounts, this offense was due to her gazing at the prime minister of the time when he was reporting to Wu Zetian. It seemed that Shangguan Wan'er, who was then in her 20s, was attracted by the prime minister's handsome demeanors and forgot about her secretarial duties. If this story were true, Wu Zetian was certainly not an easy boss to serve. In any case, Wu Zetian didn't arrange a marriage for Shangguan Wan'er. However, she introduced her favorite nephew Wu Sansi to Shangguan Wan'er as a lover. Involved in imperial politics since the moment she was born, Shangguan Wan'er would remain at the center of political struggles, which subsequently determined many aspects of her personal life. Another story is that, in an effort to cover up the scar on her face, Shangguan Wan'er invented the makeup style known as flower tattoo, which became popular during the Tang period. When Wu Zetian passed away in 705, after the coup of Shenlong, Shangguan Wan'er was 41, having spent nearly 30 years of her life serving Wu Zetian's rise to power and her management of the dynasty. Fortunately, the emperor who inherited the throne, Zhongzong Li Xian, Wu Zetian's third son, continued to respect her literary talent and employed her in the drafting of imperial documents. She received the title of Zhao Rong as a consort of the second rank in the emperor's palace. Yet likely, she never had a real relationship with the emperor. Rather, she continued her relationship with Wu Zetian's nephew Wu Sansi as lovers. In the last lecture, we mentioned that Zhongzong was very attached to his wife Lady Wei, and even said that it's fine to pass the throne to the Wei family, which cost him the throne the first time. After he became the emperor again, he reigned along with his wife, who then became Empress Wei, Wei Hou. It seemed that even though Zhongzong had been terrorized by his mother Wu Zetian's power throughout his life, he was used to female political presence and even contemplated on passing his throne to his favorite daughter, Princess Anle. Shangguan Wan'er also enjoyed great political and literary influence at Zhongzong's court, even more so in comparison to her role during the reign of Empress Wu. For instance, Zhongzong absolved the charge of treason against Shangguan Wan'er's grandfather and father, and gave her mother a noble title. Shangguan Wan'er also served as an examiner in the state examinations for officials. No women would be given such a role later on. And one story that illustrates her literary authority during the time is about her serving as the judge for a poetic competition. As the story goes, on the last day of the first month, Emperor Zhongzong visited the Kunming Pond. When it came time to write verse, the officials composed more than 100 poems on imperial command. A platform was set up in front of the imperial tent, and Shangguan Wan'er was ordered to select one of the poems to be the text for a melody the emperor had recently composed. The officials congregated in front of the platform. Soon the sheets of paper of the rejected poems fluttered down, and each person gathered up his own poem. When everyone had returned to their places, only the poems of the famous poets Shen Quanqi and Song Zhiwen had not yet been rejected. After a while, yet another sheet of paper fluttered down. Everyone rushed to pick it up and see whose poem it was. It turned out to be Shen's poem. Thereupon, Shangguan Wan'er pronounced the following verdict. The two poems are comparable in talent and power, but the final couplet of Shen's poem reads, "The wood from which I've been carved is rotten. I'm ashamed to look upon Yu Zhang's beams. 微臣雕朽志，修睹豫章才." Here he appears to lack the necessary vital force. The final couplet of Song Zhiwen's poem reads, "It doesn't matter that the moon will fade. The pearl I bring will turn the night to day. 不愁明月尽，自有夜珠来." Even here, he shows his dashing boldness. Shen then conceded defeat. In the words of the author of Red Brush, never before or after has a woman in traditional China occupied such a conspicuous and influential position in public literary life, the male domain par excellence. And we found the following eulogy on her literary influence in an early source. It was thanks to her that outstanding talents were sought everywhere and that literary life was greatly enriched, that the state had an ample supply of gentlemen well versed in the arts, so that the court was not burdened by uncultured ministers, and that for 20 years throughout the land there were no eminent persons whose talents were ignored. Shangguan Wan'er's success in her literary career proved a prophecy story upon her birth true. According to the old history of Tang, many years earlier, when Sheng Guanwan's mother was pregnant with her, she dreamed that someone gave her a large weighing balance. A diviner had told her, "You'll give birth to a child who will ascend to the highest of positions and control the balance of power in the land." When she gave birth to a girl, he was jeered by all who heard about it because the prediction obviously had turned out to be wrong. But when Wan Er later held all the power in the palace, the words of the diviner were substantiated after all. However, as a political figure at the center of the imperial palace, Shang Guanwan was also besieged by the complex power struggle surrounding her. The main tension of the period came from Empress Wei's bid for power and her effort at making her daughter Princess Anle as the heir to the throne. This tension led to the palace coup, led by the crown prince Li Chongjun in 707, during which Wu Sansi, Shang Guanwan's lover, was killed. Li Chongjun's coup failed and he died in the process, but it was a wake-up call for Shang Guanwan to change her affiliation. She began to distance herself from Empress Wei and Princess Anle, and started an alliance with Wu Zetian's daughter, Princess Taiping. Finally, in 710, Emperor Zhongzong suddenly passed away, and it was widely rumored that Empress Wei and Princess Anle poisoned him. In the face of this crisis, Shang Guanwan drafted an edict according to the position she and Princess Taiping had agreed on, that is, to appoint a young son of Zhongzong's as the emperor while inviting Li Dan, Wu Zetian's fourth son, and Zhongzong's younger brother, as a regent alongside Empress Wei. However, Empress Wei struck down this proposal of appointing Li Dan as the regent, as she hoped to monopolize imperial power following the model of Wu Zetian. Nevertheless, Empress Wei did not get to enjoy the extraordinary success of Wu Zetian. A few weeks later, she and Princess Anle were killed in a coup led by Li Longji, Li Dan's son, who would become the famous Xuanzong emperor of the Tang dynasty. Shang Guanwan unfortunately lost her life in this palace coup. Historical records report that she submitted to Li Longji's force the edict she had initially drafted with the appointment of Li Dan, Li Longji's father, as the regent. She thought that this document expresses her loyalty and could save her life. However, after a few moments of hesitation, Li Longji ordered the execution of Shang Guanwan. Historians have debated on Li Longji's motives. Other than concrete political reasons, it seems that by sentencing Wan to death, Li Longji was reclaiming a male-centered model for imperial power and putting an end to the model of female power set down by his own grandmother, Wu Zetian. Recently, in 2014, Shang Guanwan's tomb was rediscovered, and it left us with more mysteries. The tomb was built according to the standards for a royal relative, indicating Wan's high status. However, the tomb was purposefully destroyed, and Shang Guanwan's body and burial objects were nowhere to be found. Nevertheless, a study with her epitaph remained intact. This epitaph paints a highly positive portrayal of Shang Guanwan's character and talent. So who destroyed the tomb of Shang Guanwan? One theory is that Princess Taiping, Shang Guanwan's political ally, was deeply saddened by her death and built the tomb. Later, in 713, 3 years after Zhongzong's death, Princess Taiping herself was forced to commit suicide following her failed coup against Li Longji, who then succeeded the throne as the Xuanzong emperor. Likely, After Princess Taiping's death, Li Longji ordered the destruction of Shangguan Wan'er's tomb. However, why the epitaph remained undestroyed is a mystery. It does seem that, despite his political enmity against Shangguan Wan'er and the female political power she represents, Li Longji likewise appreciated her talents as a poet. Her poems were collected into 20 chapters under the reign of Li Longji. However, only a few of her works were preserved to today. By the few extant poems, we may get a sense of Shangguan Wan'er's poetic talent. Interestingly, in these poems, she rarely wrote in the voice of a woman. Rather, her poetic persona is that of a male hermit, who withdrew into nature to cultivate his own purity and longevity, away from worldly strife. Here is an example. 弹鸾烛影，标序松声，不凡歌吹，自足于情。Waving gently bamboo shadows, tossed by winds the size of pines. There's no need for song and music. This suffices to please one's mind. By writing about the ideal of the hermit, Shangguan Wan'er followed the footsteps of earlier poets such as the Seven Sages of the Bamboo Grove and Tao Qian or Tao Yuanming of the Eastern Jin Dynasty, and anticipated the appearance of famous nature poets during the Tang Dynasty, such as Wang Wei several decades later. Here is another example in which she imagines whistling bamboo as flutes and flowing streams as zithers. 岩鹤似登临，银幕复疑心。凤凰类长笛，流水当鸣琴。I climb steep cliffs to my heart's desire. It clears out the eyes, delights the soul. The wind-tossed bamboo serve as flutes, the flowing streams as sounding zithers. Finally, here is a poem that portrays herself in the process of writing and playing the zither. 傍池聊事笔，一时悬题诗。欲弹山水调，终拟从中期。Sitting by a pond, I wield a while my brush. Leaning on a rock, I compose a poem. At times, I strum a tune of streams and hills. Forever let me live a hermit's life. To quote from the Red Brush, Shangguan Wan'er presents herself in this series as a hermit who has fled the political dangers of life at court. Stephen Owen, who's a sinologist, comments, during this period dominated by women, as opposed to reign of Empress Wu, which was dominated by one woman, Shangguan Wan'er could unself-consciously step into a role that previously had been reserved for men. In none of the 25 poems is there even a hint that the author is a woman. They do not express any of the unease women writers sometimes showed in transgressing their gender roles. Furthermore, if the imperial consort of the Shining Countenance, whose face was tattooed as a criminal, could play the male hermit, then roles were not determined by one's status or by the social situation. They could be freely chosen in such a way that allowed the person to forget her other life. That element of self-fashioning in role-playing was to be one of the strongest characteristics of the period that followed, the Haitang. And as the authors of the Red Brush comment, if this is true, Shangguan Wan'er can claim to be the godmother of what is known as the Golden Age of Chinese poetry, the Haitang, famous for producing great poets such as Wang Wei, Li Bai, Du Fu, and many others. So, from the literary trope of self-fashioning practiced by Shangguan Wan'er to Wu Zetian's promotion of the civil examination that stimulated literary activities, the golden age of Chinese poetry likely had an obscured female origin. By rediscovering Shangguan Wan'er, we are rediscovering an alternative Chinese literary history and a historical era in which women acted and imagined differently. In the next video, while we shift our purview to the latter part of the Tang Dynasty, we'll see creative energy from a very different place for women, that is, from the class of courtesans. In contrast to women's role as political and literary authorities, the courtesans were completely at the mercy of their male patrons. That did not stop them from acting unconventionally, yet these unconventional acts became the quick prelude to tragic endings, as we shall see.